to be with all of you. Before we begin, I'd like to ask a favor. For the next 30 minutes, I'm going to invite you to become curious because curiosity changes everything. It changes the questions we ask, the way we see ourselves, the way we see other people, and sometimes it changes the entire direction of a life. So
Yeah,
today, I'd like every one of you to become an honorary sisterhood sleuth.
yeah. Yes, Kathy, welcome to the Global Virtual Summit 2026.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't give you a chance to introduce me first.
Nice. And before going to start your session, I want to introduce you about our audience. Okay. And
Okay.
yeah, Kathy Warshaw is a life coach and entrepreneur, helping teens build confidence, purpose, and resilience. At 73, everything changed. Uh, Like one December morning, she woke from a vivid dream filled with mystery, puzzles, and a world of secrets and decided to write it down. Within 3 days, she had written half of the Obsidian Eye and outlined seven more books. That single moment grew into an eight-book global series, Secret Societies and the Sisterhood Seeds, following two sisters and an international team uncovering hidden truths across the world. But Cathy didn't stop at storytelling. She expanded the series into a global youth empowerment movement, creating the Sisterhood Health Youth Outreach Program, a free curriculum used by schools and youth organizations worldwide. And today, her work spans books, education, media, and interactive experiences, all rooted in one belief. Every young person has the ability to think, grow, and become the hero of their own story. Kathy's journey is a proof that it's never too late to begin, and that sometimes the most unexpected dreams lead to the greatest impact. That was a great bio, and you have done a great job, Kathy. And the stage is all yours.
Thank you. So today, I'd like every one of you to become an honorary sisterhood sleuth. Now, don't worry, no decoder ring, although I can't promise there won't be clues, because today I'd like us to solve a mystery together. Not the kind hidden beneath an ancient castle, not one buried inside an old treasure chest. This mystery is far more important. It's been following me for most of my life. Here's the mystery. How do ordinary children become extraordinary adults? Not famous adults, not wealthy adults, extraordinary human beings. People who are curious, kind, resilient, thoughtful, creative. People who know how to think for themselves. People who have the courage to ask difficult questions and the confidence to keep asking them. I don't believe that journey begins when they're 18 or 25 or when they graduate from college. I believe it begins much earlier. It begins when one caring adult notices something extraordinary before that child notices it themselves. Before we go any further, I'd like you to think about one young person, just one. Maybe they're 10, maybe they're 17, maybe they're your son, your daughter, or grandchild, a student, a neighbor, whoever that child is. Don't say their name, just keep them in your heart throughout our adventure today. I have a feeling by the end, you'll understand exactly why I asked you to think of them. Honorary sisterhood sleuths, every great mystery begins with the first clue. Here's ours. I have a younger sister. We grew up in the same home, the same parents, the same schools, the same teachers. Yet somehow our experiences couldn't have been more different. My sister seemed comfortable in school. I never did. I spent more time looking out the classroom window than I did looking at the blackboard. Not because I wasn't paying attention, I was, just not to the same things everyone else was noticing. I noticed people. I imagined stories. I wondered where they were going. I asked questions that didn't always have easy answers. My imagination never seemed to stop. Unfortunately, my teachers didn't call it curiosity, they called it distraction. So after hearing that often enough, I began believing them. Maybe there really was something wrong with me. Have you ever known a child like that? The quiet one, the dreamer, the child who seems to live inside their imagination, the one who doesn't always fit neatly inside the box everyone else expects. What if they're not distracted? What if they're simply noticing clues the rest of us have forgotten how to see? Looking back now, I realize there was never anything wrong with me. I simply learned differently. But it took me decades to understand that. And sometimes I wonder how many children are quietly asking themselves the very same question I once asked: what's wrong with me? What if we be, we've been asking the wrong question? What if the better question is, what gifts are waiting to be discovered? That one question changes everything because the moment we stop looking for what's wrong and begin looking for what's possible, we begin changing the story a young person tells themselves. And every extraordinary adult was once an ordinary child whose story was still being written. That's why I believe every caring adult has extraordinary influence, not because we all have the answers, but because sometimes one encouraging conversation, one thoughtful question, one person who notices a gift becomes the clue a child carries for the rest of their life. Now, you're probably wondering how a painfully shy little girl who barely graduated from high school ended up writing an international mystery series. Well, the answer began with a dream, one that has changed the rest of my life. It begins with our second clue. I had been retired for 5 years. Then one morning, I woke up with the most vivid dream. It was so clear, I knew I had to write it down before I forgot it. I locked myself up in my office, and 3 days later, I had written the first half of The Obsidian Eye and outlined the remaining 7 books. People ask me all the time, did that really happen? Yes, it really did. And if someone else had told me that story, I'm not sure I would have believed it either. At first, I thought the dream was about writing a book. Now I realize it was the beginning of something much bigger. It wasn't just about writing stories, it was about reaching children, helping them become curious, helping them believe in themselves, and helping them discover that they are capable of far more than they ever imagined. Remember the mystery we're trying to solve? How do ordinary children become extraordinary adults? I don't think extraordinary adults suddenly appear one day. I think they're built, one experience at a time, one encouraging adult at a time, one challenge at a time, one discovery at a time. And sometimes one story changes the direction of a life. That's when I began asking a question that still guides everything I do today. Not how do I write a great mystery, but what if a mystery could help a young person discover something about themselves? What if every puzzle reminded them they were capable of solving problems? What if every cipher taught them to think differently? What if every clue encouraged them to look a little closer, to ask one more question, to never give up too soon? Because isn't that what life does? Life doesn't hand us the answers. Life hands us clues. Little by little, we discover who we're becoming. One of the things I love most about mysteries is that they don't reward the smartest person. They reward the most curious person, the one willing to ask, what am I missing? What haven't I noticed yet? Is there another way to look at this? Those aren't just detective questions, they're life questions. They're leadership questions. They're the questions that help young people understand themselves. And then, without even realizing it, I met an 8-year-old detective who handed me the clue I had been searching for all along. Clue number 3. I met him in my hometown of Upland, California. We started talking about the obsidian eye. The moment I mentioned the book, his whole face lit up. He smiled and said, "My mom reads it to me every night." Well, that was enough to make this author very happy. Then he leaned toward me. He looked around, almost to make sure nobody else could hear, and in a whisper he said, "We've been looking for the hidden doors." I whispered back, "The hidden doors?" He nodded very seriously. "The ones that lead to the underground rooms." Then he told me that he and his mom had been visiting the monuments from the story, walking around our town looking for those secret entrances. As I drove home, I couldn't stop smiling, not because he'd been looking for hidden doors, because something extraordinary had happened. He wasn't simply reading a story, he had stepped inside it. He was observing, questioning, imagining, looking at familiar places with completely different eyes. And then I realized something. The hidden doors he was searching for were never the most important hidden doors in the story. The most important door had opened inside of him, the door called curiosity. And suddenly my dream made sense. It had never really been about writing books. The books were simply the invitation. The real story was helping children discover what was already inside of them. That's when one question began following me everywhere. How do we reach one more child, then another, until someday we're reaching young people all over the world? That question became my mission, not to build a book series, not to build a business, not even to create an outreach program. Those are simply tools. My mission is much bigger, to help as many children as possible discover the extraordinary story already waiting inside them. That's why I created the Sisterhood Sleuths outreach program. It's completely free because I never wanted money to determine whether a child had the opportunity to discover what they're capable of. My mission is simple: to reach as many young people around the world as possible, whether they're learning in a classroom, at home, in a library, through a youth organization, or anywhere children gather to learn and grow. And as our journey continues, I'm committed to translating the Obsidian Eye and the outreach program into as many languages as possible, because I don't believe curiosity, hope, critical thinking, kindness, or believing in yourself should ever depend on the language a child speaks. Every child deserves that opportunity. Now, here's my favorite part. The outreach program isn't built around worksheets. It isn't about memorizing answers. It's built around adventure. The book is simply the invitation. The real adventure begins after that. Children become sisterhood sleuths. They solve mysteries, they crack ciphers, they follow clues, they learn to think outside the box and work as a team. They respectfully challenge one another's ideas. They discovered that every person brings something different, a different perspective, strength, a different way of seeing the world. Without even realizing it, they're building confidence, leadership, critical thinking, resilience, and discovering something even more important: they're discovering themselves. Sometimes the quietest child in the room is the one who notices the clue everyone else missed. And in that moment, you can almost see confidence appear, not because someone said, "Good job," but because that child quietly realizes, contributed, I helped, I matter. No one can ever take that feeling away. Honorary Sisterhood Sleuths, I'd like you to think about that young person you've been carrying with you since we began. What hidden gift do you think is waiting to be discovered? Maybe you've already seen it. Maybe no one has noticed it yet. Or maybe you're going to be the first person who does. Because sometimes one caring adult changes the direction of a child's entire life. We've gathered three very important clues: the little girl, the dream, the 8-year-old detective. Now we're ready for something different. Everything I've shared with you today comes from my heart. What you're about to see explains why it also makes sense to the brain. Let's discover our next clue together through this video. long as the environment operates exactly as expected, you're never actually going to see it. It's entirely invisible to teachers, to parents, and honestly, even to the students. Hello? Hello?
Not yet. So it is coming.
No, turn it off because only you can hear it. Nobody else can hear it.
Here all the audience can hear. So we already checked from my side.
What's that?
So there
Nobody.
is proper audio. So there is proper audio. So not fault from my end. So it is in our YouTube also. It is
Just,
showing the audio.
just please, just turn it off. Nobody hears it but you.
Yeah. So wait a minute.
Well, if you can hear me, we seem to be having tech difficulties. And as you probably heard, I asked them to please turn it off so I could continue with my speech. So hopefully they will. And I am just going to continue. So, what did you notice? Not about the science, especially since you couldn't hear very much, but about the children. Everything you've watched helps explain why curiosity is so powerful, why stories stay with us, why mystery captures our attention, why solving problems together builds confidence, and why asking questions changes the way children learn and the way they begin to see themselves. But here's what I hope you'll remember long after today. The science explains how it works. Our responsibility is deciding what we do with that knowledge. Remember the mystery we began with? How do ordinary children become extraordinary adults? After everything we've discovered together, I don't think the answer is complicated. Extraordinary adults begin as ordinary children who had someone in their life who noticed something extraordinary before they noticed it themselves. A parent, a grandparent, a teacher, a coach, a neighbor, one caring adult. Sometimes that's all it takes. Every time I speak with parents or meet educators, I hear a version of the same question. How do we help children believe in themselves? It's a wonderful question, but I wonder if we've been asking it backwards. Maybe confidence isn't something we give children. Maybe confidence is something they discover. Think about your own life. No one handed you confidence, you discovered it. The first time you solved a problem you didn't think you could solve. The first time someone trusted you with responsibility. The first time you failed and discovered failure wasn't the end of your story. Confidence isn't a gift someone gives us, it's something we uncover, one experience at a time. That's why I love mysteries. A mystery never says, here's the answer. Instead, it whispers, keep looking. You're closer than you think. Don't give up. Isn't that exactly what we hope children hear when life becomes difficult? That's also why in the Sisterhood Sleuths, no one solves the mystery alone. Everyone brings something different. One notices a clue, another sees a pattern, another asks the question no one else thought to ask, another encourages the team not to quit. That's life. None of us sees every clue, none of us has every answer, but together we discover things we never could have discovered alone. Imagine what would happen if more children grew up believing that. Instead of comparing themselves to one another, they celebrated what each person brings to the team. Imagine classrooms filled with curiosity instead of fear. Imagine children who weren't afraid to make mistakes because mistakes simply became another clue. Imagine young people who understood that asking for help isn't just a weakness, it's wisdom. Some time ago, I received a message from a reader. She didn't write to tell me she loved the mystery. She didn't tell me which character was her favorite. She simply wrote, your story helped me realize I wasn't the only one who asked so many questions. I read that sentence over and over again because at that moment I realized something. The mystery was never really about hidden tunnels or ancient symbols or secret societies. The mystery was helping young people discover they're not alone. There are other dreamers, other curious minds, other children who sometimes feel different, other young people who ask one more question simply because they can't help themselves. And maybe, just maybe, being different isn't something to fix. Maybe it's one of the greatest clues they'll ever receive. Honorary Sisterhood Sleuths, I think we've collected enough clues. Let's see if we've solved today's mystery. Remember the question we began with? How do ordinary children become extraordinary adults? After everything we've discovered together, I don't think the answer is complicated. Extraordinary adults began as ordinary children who had someone in their life who noticed something extraordinary before they noticed it themselves. Someone who saw possibility instead of limitation. Someone who encouraged questions instead of silence. Someone who celebrated curiosity instead of trying to control it. Someone who looked beyond grades, labels, mistakes, or fears and quietly said, I believe in you. When I look back over my own life, I realize something now that I couldn't see then. That little girl looking out the classroom window wasn't falling behind. She was becoming curious. She was imagining, she was asking questions, she was collecting clues. She just didn't know it yet. And isn't that true for so many children? Sometimes they don't need us to tell them who they are. Sometimes they simply need someone to remind them to keep looking. Remember the young person I asked you to think about at the very beginning? I hope they're still with you. People sometimes ask me, Kathy, what's next? And my answer is always the same. We keep reaching one more child, then another, because one child becomes a family, one family becomes a community, and one community can change the world. Maybe that's the real mystery, not how ordinary children become extraordinary adults. Maybe the real mystery is how many extraordinary children are quietly waiting for one caring adult to notice them. So before we say goodbye, I'd like to ask one final favor. When this is over, I hope you won't simply remember my stories. I hope you'll remember the young person you brought with you today, because they may never read one of my books, they may never hear one of my podcasts, they may never know my name, but they know yours. And that may make all the difference. The next great mystery isn't waiting to be solved, it's waiting to be encouraged. It may be sitting quietly in the back of a classroom. It may be walking through your front door every afternoon. It may be sitting across the dinner table or looking back at you through the eyes of one child who simply needs someone to believe in them. You have the opportunity to notice something extraordinary before they notice it themselves, to encourage one more question, to celebrate one more act of curiosity, to help them discover one more gift, to remind them that the story of their life is still being written. Honorary Sisterhood Sleuths, I think we've solved today's mystery, not because we found every answer, but because we discovered something even more important. Every child carries extraordinary potential. Sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's waiting quietly beneath the surface, and sometimes all it takes is one caring adult to help them discover it. I'd like to leave you with a thought that has become the compass for my own life and the heart of everything I do. Build your life like a mystery novel, full of clues, meaning, and wonder, because every child deserves the opportunity to discover that they are far more capable, far more courageous, and far more extraordinary than they ever imagined. And perhaps our greatest privilege is helping them discover that for themselves. Normally, this is where we'd open the floor for questions. Instead, I'd like to leave you with one more invitation. If today's conversation sparked an idea, a question, or reminded you of a young person in your life, I'd truly love to hear from you. Please take a moment and join our Goodreads Sisterhood Sleuths Mystery Club. There you can ask me whatever you'd like. Honorary Sisterhood Sleuths, our mystery is over. Yours is just beginning. Go help a young person discover their next clue. Thank you.
Yes, Kathy, that was an energetic presentation, and we have got a few questions from our audience, Kathy, and I want to ask you one of them.
Okay.
Why is active listening important for teenagers?
I'm sorry. What
Why
is?
is active listening important for teenagers?
Well, teenagers, aren't they a unique group of kids? There's so much that I could tell you about that. But what I'd like you to do is go on our website at www.sisterhoodsleuths.net and read what it's all about and join our club. And there I'll be able to really answer your questions. To be honest with you, I'm I need some water. I would prefer not to have open Q&A right now, but to go to the Goodreads Sisterhood Sleuths Mystery Club, if that's okay.
Okay, then fine. Thank you. And thank you so much for your presentation today. And we have gained a lot of knowledge from it. And please be on the backstage and join the next session, Kathy.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.